Good morning, colleagues. This meeting of the Board of Internal Economy is called to order. The first thing we have is the minutes of the previous meeting. Le procès verbal de la réunion précédente, est-ce qu'il y a des enjeux?
Are there any issues that have to do with the minutes of the previous meeting?
Minutes of the last meeting, not seeing anything. Okay, minutes are approved. And we go on to number 2. We have something from the Joint Interparliamentary Council, and I'm going to turn to André Gagnon and Colette Labrec-Riel pour parler de ça. Allez-y, s'il vous plaît.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This will be rather quick, after which we'll have Q&A. As you know, MPs have a number of roles. They are very present in their ridings, and they participate in the workings of the House, and they also work in parliamentary committees. They also have an important role to play with regards to international relations and interparliamentary relations.
Resources that are available to members of Parliament through the Joint Interparliamentary Council, commonly known as the JIC. So in a similar way to the Liaison Committee that allocates funds for standing committees, the JIC allocates the budget for activities through to all the 13 parliamentary associations. So today we're here to present the 2016-17 JIC report regarding parliamentary expenditures for parliamentary associations. So I'll ask Colette just to give you a brief overview of that.
So we've prepared very, very short highlights of the annual report. The annual report is indeed presented by the Joint Interparliamentary Council. They have reviewed it at their meeting in October. Just to give you a very, very high-level tale of what that last fiscal year was for associations. So indeed, the report provides an overview of the activities and expenditures of the 13 parliamentary associations. The report is basically cut up into 3 sections. The first one, and it's a fairly new format that we've been using for a few years now. We give additional information as to how associations are governed, so some information on the mandate of the JIC that's contained in the annual report itself. The second section really does provide an overview of the 13 parliamentary associations, an overview of their activities over the fiscal year, in addition to their expenditures. And finally, the third section of the report is really a focus on each association itself, providing a comprehensive list of all of their activities during the fiscal year, as well as all of their expenditures over that fiscal year. The
13 parliamentary associations over the past fiscal year carried out 83 travel activities. This number is one of the highest over the past 5 years. It has been a rather active year for parliamentary associations. The number of activities has gone up, but the average number of participants per activity has gone down. A greater number of activities, but the total number of participants on average has gone down, despite the fact that there are more participants in total. This is a strategy used by associations to carry out activities whilst keeping costs low.
For parliamentary associations for the last fiscal year, 2016-2017, was essentially $3.5 million, same as the 3 previous years. The total expenditures, as you can see, totaled $3.4 million, basically representing a budget utilization of 98%, which is somewhat unheard of for associations, meaning that indeed activities were significantly higher than in previous years. The membership fees, or often people will use the word contributions, but membership fees that the Canadian parliamentary associations pay to the international organizations for the multilateral associations amounts to $1.3 million of the total envelope available to the associations, leaving the expenditures at $2.1 million for the last fiscal year. And that basically sums up what associations did during the last fiscal year. So I'm prepared to take questions, if there are any.
So before we go on to the the request for enhanced support for parliamentary associations. Are there any questions or comments from members? Mr. Julian. Was Mr. Straw first? Fine. Mr. Straw.
I take the wisdom of the speaker to decide. I did want to ask about, we're talking about activities of parliamentary associations, and I don't know how much information you can give us or whether this needs to be pursued at another venue, but I was very concerned to learn about some trips specifically to countries like China, where there's been a marked increase in the information that is required of members of parliament to participate, some of it relating to extended family members, even family members that are no longer family members, in the case of a divorce or something like this. And we've seen cases that have involved members of our caucus where they've actually been denied entry to a country, and then but the parliamentary association travel continues, even though members of the delegation have been denied entry into a country through no fault of their own. So I wonder if there's a policy that needs to be developed by the JIC or by the parliamentary associations to prevent this from happening in the future, or if you have any comments on why some members would proceed with a trip when the host country has shown that level of contempt to members of parliament.
Yes, I'm aware of that particular situation. Given my role in supporting these activities, all of these decisions as to whether or not to proceed with an activity would be taken by the executive members of that association, so senators and members who are elected to the Canada-China, in that particular case, parliamentary association. The requirements for the visa, for instance, had been communicated to the members of the delegation, to ourselves, via the diplomatic channels. We process, if you like, the applications. In terms of IIA staff, we have little to no input as to whether or not these are appropriate or not. They really are in the diplomatic channels. The delegation, again, any decision as to whether or not an activity is going to be carried out or not really is up to the association executive. Now, the suggestion as to whether or not the JIC could review the situation, I find, is an excellent one, and I can undertake to bring that message back to the Joint Interparliamentary Council.
Now, I had the order as Mr. Strahl, Mr. Julian, and Mr. Rodriguez. I take it Ms. Bergen wants to intervene on this particular subject. Is that what members would think would be appropriate? Okay.
Yeah,
Ms.
mine's
Bergen.
on this topic. If that's all right, thank you. Yes, thank you. Mark mentioned this on my behalf, but I did want to just clarify one point for the record. And what makes this more disturbing, definitely there was information requested that not only I felt to be too personal, but there was actually another member, one of my colleagues, who also did not disclose that information, but China decided to only deny me the visa. And I think that's what's particularly troubling, that the delegation, when we are to be traveling as Team Canada, as a country, that the message should be sent to another country that chooses not only I'm a parliamentarian, I'm a House officer, and that kind of contempt was shown to me personally. And we are funding these delegations to the tune of many millions of dollars, and there needs to be some sort of a policy whereby we stand together or we fall together. I think that would be something that's in order. But I wanted to make sure that the facts are out there. I didn't withhold information, and that was why my visa was not granted. There was another member who withheld information, and she was granted a visa.
Mr. Blanc on the same topic?
No, I just wanted to be, Mr. Chair, I wanted to be on your list. Yes, please.
Okay. Well, Ms. Lepac-Riel has mentioned this is really a matter for the Joint Interparliamentary Council, but I can see why members are seized of it, concerned about it. Mr. Julian.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'm very pleased to be here at my first
Welcome
public
back.
meeting of the BOIE. Yes, I'm glad we're doing this. This is extremely important, and I'd like to stress my support for both Mr. Strahl and Ms. Bergen's comments around the JIC. It's simply not acceptable that other countries pick and choose what our parliamentary delegations are. And I think that needs to be stressed, that this is a message that comes from the entire BOIE.
Now, with regards to financial statements, I noticed, and thank you very much for having given us all information, I noted that a number of parliamentary associations, especially the Commonwealth one, received contributions. When I have a look at the Commonwealth Parliamentary Association, I see that for a number of conferences they received contributions, $5,000 for an executive committee meeting, $7,000 for a regional council meeting, and I would like to get more details on these contributions. There is one for the Canada-China and one for the Francophonie Association, but it was especially true for the Commonwealth. I would like to know what these contributions are. Page 25.
Monsieur Julian,
Yes, MP Julian. The Commonwealth Parliamentary Association is one that has a rather unique funding system. When the association pays its annual contribution fees, a number of these fees are sent back to the association when it participates in activities. It's a rather complex formula that has existed for a long time, and it's particular to this association. It's a normal way of doing things. All participant countries agree with the current formula, which explains why we pay contributions, and that for some activities, some monies are clawed back. It's an exchange. It's an exchange of our participation, and it's unique to that association. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Rodriguez, after whom we shall move on. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. A general question. How do dynamics change when they change based on changes undertaken in the Senate? We have independent senators now. They are now the biggest group in the Senate. So how will this influence or have an impact on the makeup of the committees or associations? The current transformation of the Senate has a significant impact on the governance and the operations of these associations. And since I came to my position, it has been an important theme for the interparliamentary associations, as well as for all 13 of them. The impact is true and is felt for the executive committees. They will have to reinterpret their constitution to grant spaces on a proportional basis, which is not always easy to do. During the last round of executive committee elections, that usually happens early each spring, just before the beginning of a fiscal year, the association's executive committees all had their elections and reacted satisfactorily faced with the transformations in the Senate. The various groups in the Senate were well represented on the executive committees, for example. Now, with regards to delegations, this is still a concern to the Interparliamentary Committee. The makeup of committees are decided by the executive committee of each. Even if associations in general want to be proportional, it's sometimes difficult, especially when we only have 4 or 5 parliamentarians as part of a delegation. Associations are very well aware of the issue, and they're trying to find solutions The Joint Interparliamentary Council yesterday adopted a resolution that will allow us to give more guidance in this respect over the next couple of months. Thank you. Mr. Leblanc. Thank you. Like Peter, I'm pleased to be here. I unfortunately was not here last time we had a public meeting, and so I'm very happy to be here amongst you today. Thank you for your presentation. I have 2 or 3 specific questions. I know that a number of associations have membership fees. So if you want to be part of such and such a group, the Canadian Parliament has to pay a certain amount so that we can participate in various meetings or conferences. And so could you give us a few examples of associations that are the most onerous, that are the most expensive? And do you agree that these are valid fees? Do you think that such fees are warranted on a yearly basis? Because I think, and I remember that in a number of cases, these are rather significant amounts of money. The other point, on page 8, you have table 5. You talk about miscellaneous fees. A few tens of thousands of dollars based on the year in question. So what does that mean? More specifically, what kind of expenditures fall under the miscellaneous category? Thank you. With regards to your first question, MP Leblanc, with regards to membership fees, the information is present on page 9 of the report. There are 5 associations, 6 in fact, that have to pay contributions towards membership fees. The more expensive ones are, for example, the Canadian Group of the Interparliamentary Union, as well as the Canadian NATO Parliamentary Association. These prices are established by the International Secretariat based on formula that change and that vary. Some will be calculated based on a country's GDP, some will be calculated based on the size of the Parliamentary Assembly. These formula are established by the International Secretariat, and we can either say yes or no. And Canada is part of these associations, and so we have to pay the membership fees. If we do not pay the membership fees, we simply cannot participate in their activities. Sorry, not to interrupt you, but you've just made me think of another question, if I may. In the past, as far as you know, has Canada simply said to a secretariat, no, I think that you are making us pay more than other countries are proportionally? Do we sometimes question formulas and the amounts requested of us? Do we at least engage in discussions with the Secretariat that sees Canada or Canadian Parliament as a way to get more money that they would get from other governments? Yes, the government did put pressure for the UIPU, for example, and they pressured the International Secretariat. We participated in a working group that re-examined membership fees. Since then, there's been a reduction of membership fees. What is difficult to follow is the fact that we get the bill in a foreign currency, and so we are subject to fluctuations in currencies. Sometimes the price goes down in the original currency, but for us, the price is the same in Canadian dollars.
Last question about miscellaneous charges. A lot of these charges are actually for miscellaneous items. If I can give a few examples of what is found in terms of specific expenditures. Yes, miscellaneous charges, half of those were due to captioning and interpretation services, because when we do host events, obviously we host them in multiple languages. Some of them were spent on gifts, as is international practice. There is a certain expectation in terms of protocol that is expected on parliamentary diplomacy channels. And we also have cellular charge usages. As you can appreciate, sometimes when we travel internationally, it is, from a security perspective, not always wise to be hooking on to Wi-Fi. So we are, unfortunately, having to use more of the data plans to be able to communicate with delegates as well as back here. And courier services, external printing costs, and those kinds of things. So those things do add up.
Mr. Strahl.
Referring to the same table that Mr. LeBlanc was referring to, I have a couple of questions. One that just came out of an answer. Are the limits on the value of gifts the same as the limits that a department or a ministry may give, or is that under a separate statute or separate regulation? The
context for gifts, in terms of when our parliamentarians receive gifts. So obviously the disclosure, as members will know, is $200 for a member of the House. It is somewhat different in terms of the Senate, but we do apply those policies. In terms of how gifts are selected, in terms of when we are on an outgoing delegation and are the presenters of gifts, there is normally an exchange protocol to try and determine the appropriate gift giving, and we, I will say, are trying to, how shall I put it, negotiate a reduction of those gifts, because that is the tendency for many countries, and so we are also trying to do that. We are not in a position to say we shall bring along no gifts, but the value is normally under $200. It really is diplomatic courtesy that we are trying to reciprocate, but we are cognizant of the value and the disclosure requirements, remember, so we do that with that in mind.
Yeah, I would be interested if perhaps you could come back and just give us the average value. You know, I know when as a public office holder in the former government, you know, we often were signing major treaties or agreements in principle with large Indigenous groups, and we, you know, even though they were historic national events, we were still limited to a very modest amount, and I would hope that that would be constant for the JIC as well. My question, though, my primary question revolves around per diems and working meals. In all cases, the per diem amount listed on all 5 years is significantly higher than the hospitality and working meals. I have personally not traveled with a parliamentary association, but it's my understanding from those who have that they're very structured events, that they are full of working meals and high-level dinners and whatnot. So it surprises me, quite frankly, that the per diem rate is that much higher. So are members required to indicate, do they subtract when they receive a fancy dinner from their per diem, and is there an audit function to make sure that when that paperwork comes back, that the administrators are looking through and saying, we had breakfast was provided at the hotel, we had working lunch, we had working dinner, and those amounts are subtracted, or is there simply, you know, members are getting a 5-day per diem for a 5-day trip?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Strahl, and I absolutely understand the preoccupation. The amounts of per diems and specifically may be high because there is a new tendency, even on international conferences, to not provide every single meal during the official conference activities. However, that being said, there is very much an audit function carried out on every single travel claim coming back from all delegates, members and senators, performed within my team. I do have a small financial team within IIA, and we do review every single travel claim, and we do match it up against the official program of the activities undertaken, and where there are meals provided, those certainly are not. If they were inadvertently included in the claim, they will be removed from the claim.
Would I, just following up on that, would I be right to understand that when there are outgoing delegations, that in terms of hospitality and working meals, most of that is paid for either by the conference itself or by the hosting country?
Yeah.
And are there more outgoing than incoming? Because otherwise you wouldn't understand. He's pointed out the distinction or the difference between the cost of those two headings.
I would have to actually go and dig into the actual numbers. However, my inclination would be to indicate that the amount shown under hospitality and working meals would be more for when we are hosting events here. When our parliamentarians invite their counterparts here, the 13 associations are also in the business of inviting counterparts here, as opposed to they're not always outgoing activities. They are very much incoming as well. So that amount would be primarily for incomings, and so you wouldn't find hospitality on an outgoing activity.
Are there more outgoing activities than incoming?
Yes.
Okay, that's important to understand that. Thank you. Mr. Julian.
Similar to Mr. Strahl, I haven't travelled abroad for a number of years.
Transportation guidelines, whether that's changed. Last time I took a trip was a long time ago. Are the transport guidelines, because we're looking at 60 to 70% of the overall expenditures being in transportation. What are the guidelines about use of points by members of parliament and senators? What are the guidelines around whether it's, I'm assuming it's economy class, but or do the guidelines change according to the association? Do they set their own rules, or are there standard rules now that apply to all of the associations?
Very much they are standard rules that apply to all associations, and again, this is subject to verification and audit by my financial officers. The basic line, the policy established for parliamentarians, the one that IIA uses, whether it's members or senators, in terms of expenditures charged against the budgets for association activities, is the rule of thumb is the 9-hour concurrent travel time. So economy class, unless it's over 9 hours, then we go into business class. That's pursuant to the policy for members' travel. In terms of the rationale for why that piece, the transportation piece of the pie is so large, is really due to the high cost of airline tickets, not just because it's business class, but because of the difficulty in the staff are constantly trying to get confirmation of delegates' travel and travel plans in order to take advantage. The more in advance you take an airline ticket, the less the cost of that ticket. Now, with parliamentarians, the reality is you have busy schedules, and it is highly unlikely that we confirm all delegates 3 months ahead of time of an activity, although we would certainly love to be able to do that. So we are constantly striving to purchase airline tickets and reduce that cost, but it is a very significant high cost, and the variance in delaying the purchase of an airline ticket by a week can be very significant. And because Canada is geographically where it is, inevitably most of our activities are across the pond.
I see Mr. Strahl. I think, Mr. Julian, you're finished for the moment. Thank you, Mr. Strahl.
Thank you. It indicates on the slide there that the participants have decreased from 5 to 4 on average per activity. Can you give, again, as one who has not taken one of these trips, what is the average support function? How many support staff typically accompany the parliamentarians on a typical trip?
There are clear guidelines established by the Joint Interparliamentary Council that determine how much staff will be accompanying any delegation. The rule are that a delegation to be accompanied by 2 staff members, which would be the association secretary, the clerk coming out of the group that I'm responsible for, in addition to the analysts provided by the Library of Parliament. So a delegation needs to be 5 and above to be able to be accompanied by 2 staff members. A delegation that is less than 5 will be accompanied by only 1 staff member. And in that particular situation, normally myself and the management from the library will determine on the nature of the activity which staff member is best suited to accompany. Meaning sometimes the clerk goes and will do some of the analyst's duties, or vice versa, to keep the costs down. And finally, the last rule is if there is a single delegate traveling, which does occur for some of these associations when they play a role on international committees. Normally they are not accompanied. If ever an association or an association executive wish to derogate from those roles, they must get permission from the Joint Interparliamentary Council.
Thank you.
Monsieur Rodriguez.
Ça me dérange pas là-dessus. Vous avez...
That doesn't, I don't disagree. But you said that the number of trips has gone up. Do you have enough staff? That would be the perfect moment to pass to the next presentation. I think that we're ready. Go ahead. We're now on to the next point. As you saw, Mr. Rodriguez, you've allowed us to segue beautifully into our next point. In 2016-2017, we had lots of work to do.
Requested an increase in the activities budget for Parliamentary Association. That request obtained the support of the Board of Internal Economy and the Senate Standing Committee on Internal Economy, Budgets and Administration. I think that was last November, in November of 2016. This represented an increase of 47% of the activities budget, going from 2.1 million, as we've seen, to 3.1 million for the new fiscal year, starting 2017. 2018. But at that time, no request for extra resources was put forward regarding the support to parliamentary associations activities benefiting from an expanded envelope, and we'll explain why in a second. We informed the JIC at that time that we would wait and see and report later on. We have reported back to the JIC, and that led to the recommendation that we're presenting today.
Merci, André. So if I can go through again just a few highlight points, and then we could take questions. So yes, the Joint Interparliamentary Council, at the time that it considered the request for the additional funding, did specifically ask me whether or not, Colette, if there's additional funding for activities, presumably the activities will go up, will you have enough staff to be able to support these activities? And as André mentioned, we suggested that we will wait and see, because it depends what the take-up of that additional funding was going to be. It wasn't clear to me, because there is a difference between whether or not the take-up is in terms of increasing the number of delegates to the same activities. That represents an increase in workload, but it is different than increasing the number of activities and simply having more activities. So I wanted to wait and see what the effect was and the take-up by association was. The trend began last fiscal year in terms of the increase in number of activities and the ways that associations were utilizing additional funding, and the trend has been maintained and increased in the first 6 months of this fiscal year. The highlights presented are that sorry, I should go back to the actual funding, the resource request. The resource request is simply to add another team to be able to support association activities. So one association secretary, one clerk, and one association administrative assistant to be able to handle the increase in activities, so to be able to respond to higher levels of operational requirements. The third resource being requested is to be able to respond to the communications requirements of associations. Associations, as they're taking on the parliamentary diplomacy work, wish to provide some communication of that work, whether it be by news releases, whether it be by a very modest presence on social media or websites. Associations, chairs and executives have been presenting to the JIC for the past 2 years now their requirement for better support in terms of a communication and a more responsive communications platform. And the JIC agreed with these requests. So the total request really is in terms of the salaries for these 3 additional FTEs, as you see up on the board. So a little over 300,000, with the 30-70 or the 70-30 sharing formula between the House and the Senate. This would mean slightly under 220,000 for the House, and with the remainder being for the Senate. In terms of, as I was going into a little earlier, in terms of the level of activity, André mentioned that the additional funding represented an increase of available funds to carry out activities of 47%. Indeed, in the first 6 months of this current fiscal year, associations have indeed carried out more activities, so increasing the number of activities themselves, particularly in outgoing, and they have also increased the number of delegates. So more activities, more delegates, and the average number of delegate per activity has also increased by 13%. So basically the request is quite a simple one. It is directly in line with our ability to be able to respond to operational requirements.
I have Ms. Bergen, Mr. Rodriguez, Mr. Julian, and Mr. Strahl.
Thank you, Speaker. So I would have I think I was a fairly new member of BOIE when the increase was approved. A pretty substantial increase, 47%, for something that, as much as we all like to see the value in it, but it's not like there are measurable outcomes that we can say, here's what we were able to achieve as far as measurable. A lot of it is relationship, and those things are important. But I am feeling uncomfortable after being part of the group that approved a 47% increase for travel for members of parliament and senators, to now be told that, and I realize that it's a 200 and some ask, but it's a total for taxpayers of over $300,000. And this is to continue, it would be a continual need. I'm feeling uncomfortable with this, and I'm wondering if there may be a better solution, i.e. maybe the travel is scaled back, and maybe what we need to find out is what could the current staff hire in terms of activity within these associations. And maybe that's what we should be looking at, what can be handled, and maybe scale back the travel a little bit in order to not overwork the staff who are currently there. Has that been considered, or is that a possibility?
In terms of being able to scale back what the staff are able to support or not support, as I referred to earlier in terms of how many staff are allowed to travel with delegations, it is fairly already pared down. If you only have a delegation of 4 members, only 1 staff is allowed to go. Sometimes it's the IIA staff, sometimes it's the Library of Parliament staff. To go with 4 delegates without staff would be, again, something that the parliamentarians may have thoughts on. There was a discussion this week at the Joint Interparliamentary Council specifically of that rule, and the Council itself wished to maintain that level of staffing. Often when associations are engaging on the international scene in either conferences or bilateral relations, some of those, especially the multilateral associations, Canada does pay a hefty price to adhere to those in terms of membership fees. And if the delegates are to be effective as they participate in those activities, they do need support. They often take on international roles in terms of these multilateral associations and need support from staff to be able to play those roles, whether it's in drafting resolutions or in presenting reports at those international activities. Now, what can staff do less of? Again, I've done an administrative review. I've been with IIA for 2 years, and we have looked at, we have done a lean exercise, review exercise, to try and find efficiencies in some of our business line areas. We've done an administrative review for the whole of IIA. The staffing hasn't changed, basically hasn't changed since the actual creation of this joint service. It has remained the same since the early 2000s. The staffing levels remain the same, while as the number of parliamentarians has increased and the number of activities has increased. The staff are trying to meet the operational requirements, but it is quite clear that if the level of funding remains the same, therefore the level of activity remains high, I will not be able to respond to operational requirements.
Yeah, and I think my suggestion was that the activity maybe be reduced. That would be what I would see as a solution to this.
And from that perspective, it's again like parliamentary committees. Parliamentary committees are independent on their own to decide whatever activities they would like to take on. It's about the same thing for parliamentary associations. inside all of the guidelines and all of the budget allocation provided to them. So our staff reacts to those situations the same way we do for committees.
Mr. Rodriguez.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you. Two quick questions. What is the hiring process for these people? Who will choose them, and how will they be chosen? We're talking about the 3 positions. Second question, more specifically, about the communications coordinator. Does that mean that currently there is no type of communication? And will this coordinator do this for all associations? With regards to hiring, Mr. Rodriguez, I would like to note that the system used by the House and the Senate is one where there's a 70-30 preponderance towards the House. This is used also for human resources. We want 70% of total staff at the Directorate from the House, and 30% of staff would come from the Senate. This balance is not at the moment well represented, and it has been the case for some time. The hiring process, if the committee said yes, the 3 members of staff will come from the House because we're not currently at 30%. The first position, which is a clerk position, which is subject to a rotation between the House and the Senate, is similar. We take from a pool, and this person is sent to either journals or the committee. Now, the question is whether this person will come from the Senate. These are people that work on a rotational basis. Perhaps it will be a new hire or a current Senate clerk that already has experience that will be assigned to my service. It's a competition because we're searching for additional resources for the Association Secretary. Currently, there is no one in my service, which is a joint service, that works on associations' communications requirements. We have to follow the Senate and the House formula with regards to communications, which is unique. Someone in the field who would understand the needs of both chambers would be much more efficient and effective in meeting our requirements. Thank you.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you. I have a quick question and then a number of comments. My question is, what percentage of this $1 million increase, what percentage is already subject to obligations before the end of March? We have an extra $1 million for 2017-2018. So how much of this money has already been used, or how many have already been earmarked for travel and other obligations? As you can appreciate, an association's work requires long-term planning. Because of the high expenditures in traveling, the sooner the better. Very early on in our calendar year, associations have submitted their activity plans for the next fiscal 12-month year. As it stands with regards to our current fiscal year, we are at 50% of the available budget, which is a rather aggressive rhythm, because traditionally speaking, activities where we spend more funds are later on in the year. December, January, February and March are very busy months with regards to multilateral meetings and conferences. That has been the case in the past, and so in my opinion, even if the activity will happen in January, it is possible for us to already have purchased flights if delegates have already been confirmed. The expenditures aren't already written down, but they're already earmarked. I understand, but you say 50%? 50% of the whole budget, or 50% of this extra $1 million? all comes back to the same. Out of the $3.1 million available for activities, over $1.4 million has already been spent.
I read through all the documentation yesterday and I've asked some questions. I feel very uncomfortable about coming back and adding money to the JIC when we've already, as a group, the BOIE, I wasn't there, but I'm sure smart heads were around the table, already added $1 million onto the budget. If the money is not fully subscribed, and that I believe that is the case, I think it is true that the staffing is deficient because we have very hardworking staff, and there is no doubt when you increase the overall level of activity, that is going to put a real strain on very hardworking staff already. So I believe that those additional positions are needed. I just don't feel comfortable at all with giving another $313,000 to the JIC when we provided them with a $1 million increase earlier this year. And it would seem to me, for the JIC, the path that they should be taking is using that increase that they received to put their administrative house in order and provide that staffing level out of the increase of funds. So I don't feel comfortable at all adding $313,000 to their budget. I do believe with the money they have already that there is an ability for them to allocate a portion of those funds for the staffing increase so that the staff are actually in a settled environment, can do their good work and not have the strains that come from such a significant increase in activity.
It seems to me that there's not, it appears to me that there's not likely to be a consensus in favor of this, of accepting this request. In view of that, do members wish to continue the discussion on this topic, or do they wish to come back or wish to go on to the next item? That's the question, I guess. Okay. Then in that case, Mr. Strahl is next.
Yep.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. Okay.
Just to add, if we are going to ask for more information, I did want to get some thoughts on the record and ask some questions as well. As has been said, there's been a near 50% increase in funding, 2.1 to 3.1 million. And we've learned, obviously, that it says that the resulting increase in activities is having a significant impact on IIA staff. And none of us want to see that, but there are two solutions here. One is to increase the staff so that they no longer feel that pressure. The second is to reduce the level of activity, to right-size the level of activity with the current staffing levels. And that's a question that I would have is what level of activity? 83 trips is too much for the current group. 83 travel activities, whatever that, if that's trips or incoming, outgoing. If 83 is too much for the current group, I would like to know what is the right number of trips for the current group. Because I think that is something that's what the JIC should be looking at. So they should present us with two scenarios. This is the expansionist, we've got $1 million extra, here's what we need to support that. There should be, I understand there are two different funding envelopes, but if we can't support an extra $1 million in travel, then we shouldn't have an extra $1 million in travel, would be my perspective on that they need to give us an indication of how many trips they can take, because I will tell you, as a new whip, seeing all of these travel requests come across my desk, to quote Field of Dreams, if you build it, they will come. If you offer a trip, members of Parliament will line up, parliamentarians will take the trip. If the trips are reduced, less members will travel, yes, but I think we need to have a rationalization here of, with a significant, just because they were granted a significant amount of money doesn't mean it all needs to be spent. And so that's what I would like to see the JIC and the staff come back with, is that what can you do with the current staffing group? And I would say it would be incumbent on the JIC to do that within the current funding envelope for the staffing group.
I think that's a comment, unless Ms.
will certainly bring that message to the JIC.
Thank you. Ms. Chager.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to say, first of all, that I do appreciate the fact that though there was an increase in support, as was requested, that you have actually looked to see where those resources can go and are coming back after looking at where those activities are. I really do believe that Canada, more than ever, has an important role to play on the international stage. I believe that's what these committees do, is provide those opportunities. I further believe that there must be an ability, because I know we've been really about the whole evidence-based and collecting data to make sure we have it, to be able to find and measure the engagement in relation to these activities. So there must be a way to see what are the activities of the associations, where are their impacts, because we're seeing that our economy is growing, and we're seeing that, you know, businesses are not only looking to Canada but looking to the world, and part of these relationships, the people-to-people connections, increase business-to-business connections, therefore open up export markets to really be able to have a greater market for the great Canadian products and services. So I'd love to know if we're exploring metrics to be able to measure perhaps these engagement activities and what it results to. I would also just like to know, you've mentioned about communications and the support that's necessary, but could you tell me a little bit more about the outcomes that we are expecting with better support? I've noticed that, like all Canadians, members and staff put in many hours, so there must be, at some point, it has to be realistic. We have to ensure that we're treating people well and compensating adequately. So I'd love to know what are some of the intended or what we might see as outcomes. And I further understand that the JIC is members of all party are present, so they must have done some work around this prior to you coming to this table. So members of all parties must have had some agreement or concern that the original increase was not adequate. I would love to know if you can inform us, through the chair obviously, of any major concerns of why we are making this request and why it is so necessary at this time. Thank you.
Okay, I'll see if I can address all your points, Ms. Jager. In terms of exploring metrics, that would really belong to each of the associations. When they prepare their planned activities, they are meeting certain objectives within their mandate. So whether it's multilateral associations or bilateral associations, when deciding upon their activities for the next fiscal year, they look at what is occurring, where are Canada's opportunities internationally. Again, I'm not well positioned to speak to that value judgment. That is made by parliamentarians and members of the executives of each of the associations. For example, I do know that there was a significant discussion at the JIC about the level of funding that they would allocate to the Canada-US Bilateral Association. Given Canada's priority that Canada may have with regards to its relationship with the United States. But again, this is not something at a staff level that we would have any effect on. As Andre mentioned earlier, we are very responsive to operations and activities and decisions taken by parliamentarians who are members of these associations. In terms of what would be the value added or what the addition of 3 additional staff could bring, it really is only to meet the increase in operational demands, in the sense that current staff are working extended hours. There is an increase in sick leave, there's a decrease in ability to take annual leave. It really is, I'm not trying to propose that staff undertake a new program, a new level of service. It really is to meet the daily requirements of increasing association activities. And you're quite right, the members of the JIC are represented by all of the parties, and House and Senate as well. The discussion in terms of the initial funding request came from pressures from all of the associations. Every year, the planning exercise is the same. They submit plans for activities with costed out plans, and the total of those budget requests far exceed what's available in the budgetary envelopes. The JIC is caught in a cyclical pattern of having to sometimes be able to allocate funds to address only 50% of the submitted plans. So associations do have to go through an exercise after they prepare their plans, then receive the bad news of, fine, but you're getting only 50% of what you need to carry out those plans, and then go back and say, okay, so which one of our activities that we wanted to do will we cut out? This is a cyclical pattern for associations. So the pressure for that increased funding was to try and permit them to carry out a little bit more of those activities that correspond to their mandates.
Thank you very much. I think it's time for us to move on from this to another topic. So we'll go on now to the next item, which is 3A, submission to the board regarding sustaining an evolving campus-wide operation under the long-term vision and plan. J'invite M. Benoît Giroux, Mme Julie Allard, M. Jacques Giguère, and Mme Rima Adams to the table. Monsieur Giroux.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you for being here today. Today, the purpose is it's a financial ask for additional resources to sustain the evolving campus and also the upcoming move to the West Block and especially the decommissioning of the Center Block. So I have a deck. I have a deck that I'm going to go through that provides an overview of the submission. So as you know, over the last several years, the campus has undergone significant change as part of the ongoing rehabilitation of projects funded under the
in section B as opposed to section A of our books, do you know? Because we have a deck, but is it the same deck or? Okay,
section
so you're distributing this deck. It's the one we're watching on the screens.
Okay.
Thank you very much. We don't have it in front of us, I guess, unless somebody else does. Thank you. Yeah, we do have it. Excuse me, I'm mistaken. Please go ahead.
Okay. So the campus has undergone a number of changes over the years under the approved long-term vision and plan. 2018, next year, is a milestone year for the House of Commons with the upcoming opening of the West Block, the Visitors Welcome Center Phase 1, and the Government Conference Center. Further to this, we're also going to initiate the decommissioning of the Center Block in preparation for its long-term rehabilitation. To support these major initiatives and to sustain the ongoing support for the campus-wide operations and to the move of the West Block and decommissioning of the Center Block, we need additional resources to continue to provide the current service levels to members. We have a table here that highlights the ask and the different type of activities. As you can see, it's divided onto two different categories. The ongoing support for campus-wide operation, which is mainly a ask for permanent resources, and also the second category, which is the move to the West Block and the decommissioning of Center Block, which, of course, is an ask for temporary resources over a 2 to 3 year period. Mainly, the additional resources are in the area of maintaining the building and the additional handling services that will be required due to the actual configuration of the West Block and the Visitors Welcome Center. The West Block doesn't have a dedicated freight entrance. It's going to be serviced through the west side of the Center Block, which adds additional transportation of day-to-day deliveries, and that could be mail, food, the garbage, the recycling, and all types of deliveries over a distance and over multiple levels that we currently don't have in the current setting in the Center Block. We would also need temporary resources in the area, one temporary resource in the area of locksmithing, as we have to remove all the locks in the Center Block to preserve them, as well as in the area of photography services to support the curator in the management of the heritage and the documentation of the heritage collection. In terms of transportation and fleet management services, in the future setting of the operation of the West Block and the Visitors Welcome Center, all the food will be transported from the food production facility, which is off-site in the south end of Ottawa and would require additional trips because we're going to lose our kitchen that we currently have in the center block. There's an ask for 2 additional resources in the for the refinishing and the touching of the heritage furniture. We have a long list that has been provided by the curator of heritage furniture that's going to get out of the center block, that's not going to be reassigned to the west block, that needs to be retouched and refinished in order to be ready for the reopening of the center block and to also be maintained in the collection. Other temporary resources in the area of, in terms of procedural services and in terms of readiness of system, and also with the curator's office for the actual management of the heritage collection during the decommissioning of the center block. Same type of requirement in terms of all the assets that we're going to move out of the center block have to be tracked, stored, etc. So in terms of multimedia and material contract management activities. For a total of 14 permanent resources and 8 temporary resources. The actual amounts are in the last bullet under that slide. For 2018-2019, an ask of $2.7 million. 2019-2020, $2.1 million. It goes down because we exhaust some of the temporary resources. And same thing for 2020 to 2021, it goes down to 1.7 for the remaining for the permanent task of 1.4.
I have Mr. Rodriguez.
Est-ce que je peux faire un commentaire, là, vraiment?
A comment with all due respect. What I note is that even the francophones are giving their presentations in English. Don't want to be mean, but we do have 2 official languages and they have equal footing here. In any case, thank you for your presentation. I would like to know how many buildings are under your responsibility. Answer: over 25 are under the responsibility of the House of Commons. It has gone up over the past number of years, with the addition of 180 Wellington last year. The year before then we had the Sir J. and A. MacDonald building, and there will be another new building with the creation of the Visitors Welcome Center. So buildings vary from one to the other. Now let's just think of the Justice Building that was renovated 15 or 17 years ago, if I remember rightly. But when we finish the current renovations, are we going to re-renovate the Justice Building? Is this a normal cycle? Yes, we proactively manage and maintain buildings. Public Works has a plan to renovate buildings in that way. Money has been set aside for moving from Centre Block to West Block. What happens if we simply do not move? What happens to this money? It's a very good question, Mr. Rodriguez. Indeed, the reason for which we have our current timetable set to the summer of 2018, that is why we're asking you now to have the monies ready for next year's budget. In case there is a 1-year delay in moving, we won't use the money next year, And we would simply ask that these monies be deferred through supplementals. Thank you. Mr. Stroll, Mr. Julian, Ms. Bergen, and then Mr. LeBlanc.
I do have several questions or comments that I'm hoping you can address. I would like, note here says that internal reallocations will not be sufficient to fully mitigate the anticipated resourcing pressures on the new facilities. Can you describe to me, for instance, in the case you mentioned the center block cafeteria, I assume the parliamentary restaurant would be similarly unavailable. There are several staff members there. Some of them I know only work when we do. But are they all going to work in this off-site location? Are they being laid off? Are they? I guess, Mike, it's surprising to me that if we're closing down one building and opening the other, that we need 22 new full-time equivalents to maintain the level of service. I know you've explained some of them, but just explain the reallocation process for me. What is happening to the hundreds of staff that manage the assets here, including the assets that will be different between West Block and Centre?
Yes, thank you. We do actually reallocate all the staff from the Centre Block to the West Block or other building as required, depending on the operational requirements. The delta comes from mainly because the Centre Block, when you compare the actual footprint of the Centre Block that we have to maintain with the footprint that we're going to have to maintain in the West Block and the Visitors Welcome Center Phase 1, it's basically the same. There's 1.5% difference between the two different footprints, so which is not significant. The difference comes from the type of finishes that will be in the West Block, mainly carpeting and lots of glasses that will require additional maintenance on our and operations from our staff. And also, as I indicated earlier, the fact that the building will not have a direct freight entrance. It's going to be, all the deliveries will be done from a remote freight area, which requires additional distance. And we've done a full workloading assessment of what that means, and that's where some of those resources will be required.
So you're talking, this isn't new trucks then, this is individuals to physically move materials from that location to the other? Because there's the material, maintenance and material handling services want 2 new full-time equivalents, and then transportation and fleet management is 3. So those 2 new permanent people are just because they're going to be walking, traveling physically further? Is that what you're saying to me?
Well, there's that requires additional personnel to do the actual delivery, because we're not getting the deliveries to the exact door, so we still have to travel the goods within the building that we don't currently do in this building, like from the door to the actual door. So there's that. Also, let's not forget that we operate on shifts. So we cover a 2-shift operation. So right there, because of the hours of service of the deliveries, we have to double up the amount because it's over more than 1 shift. In terms of the transportation, it's because all the food deliveries will be done from the food production facility. Right now, we're using the food production facility at a reduced percentage. I would say probably 40% of the overall capacity that it was designed for. As we move to the West Block, since we're losing the production kitchen in the Centre Block, everything will be produced at the remote site, which is 15 kilometers from and we're going to need to do additional deliveries, and we need additional refrigerated trucks for that.
So are the trucks themselves included in this 2.7 million, or is that a
Yes,
separate?
it's all included.
Okay. You talked about in the tenant operations, capacity must be expanded and operations must be structured differently for optimal response efficiency. I don't particularly pretend to know what optimal response efficiency is, but can you describe the difference that a member would experience if this did not go ahead, if the additional 3 permanent resources were not allocated? What could a member expect to see different in our day-to-day operations here?
Yes, the activities in the tenant area have increased by over 40% in the last 1 and 2 year because of the onboarding of the Sir Johnny MacDonald and the 180 Wellington. And what we forecast with the actual move to the West Block, it's that this trend will continue. And in order to service the members to the level of service that they deserve, we actually looked at how we can streamline our operation and become more efficient and better allocate our resources to continue to provide the same level, the same or improved level services to the day-to-day requests we receive from the different members' offices in day-to-day building support activities.
In the case of the the temporary additions to the staffing levels, what are the obligations? What parameters are you operating under to determine that should be a full employee with benefits? That the costs for, say, a new locksmith is near $100,000 when you factor in salary, benefits, and operations. Certainly, if there was a major corporation was, and I know we have heritage assets that are a little different, but there would be a competitive bidding process for some of these more temporary activities, including the other one I saw was ensuring that the House of Commons is the new chamber is up and running. So what are do you have any flexibility to do an RFP on that, or is it that this is we're required under the way we operate to have that as part of the group?
In that type of resources, it's we have two ways to look at it. We could hire people through terms, which is basically contract, and they become with an expected end of the term. Okay, or we could go to a professional services agreement, and often in those cases, often when we go to a professional services agreement with like consultants and things like that, it ends up that it's especially when it's for a 2 to 3 year period, it costs us more than to hire directly the people and pay a salary. We've done that analysis, okay. and for us, it's the most financially responsible way to go for that 2 to 3 year period.
Two more quick things. Sorry for going on here. I look at the furniture that's in the WIP suite on the 4th floor here. I hope you're not counting my 15-year-old couch as a piece of heritage furniture that needs to be warehoused and evaluated. And is there an analysis being done so that it's not just things that are old or things that are here, it's actually things that have significant value? Okay, that's been done?
Yes, the curator of the house does a ongoing analysis of the collection and has the authority to decide what comes into the collection and what's deemed heritage. And it's not all the furniture that we have that are categorized.
Okay. And my final question, which is general but important, I think, is of the 22 full-time equivalents that you're asking for, are they all absolutely necessary to maintain current service levels, or are they nice to have? This would this would be better for members. I guess, are we improving the service level, maintaining it? Because it's a significant ask, and I think we need to respect taxpayers and just hear from you that these are absolutely necessary for the continuing function of the parliamentary precinct.
We do continuously review our operations to ensure that we're the most efficient in the day-to-day delivery of our operation. We strive to reinvent ourselves through, I've heard Colette earlier talking about lean exercises, etc. So we do the same thing in operations to ensure that we get the best value for money. The LTVP has been approved in 2001. We're coming to the crush where it come to fruition, and it adds pressure beyond what we could sustain, and that's the delta that we're looking at.
Yes. Mr. Julian.
Merci beaucoup. Monsieur Stroll a posé beaucoup de...
Thank you very much. Mr. Stroll asked many of my questions, but I wanted to reiterate a comment put forth by Mr. Rodriguez. It's important that presentations occur in both official languages from here on in. I had a number of questions, and we haven't received an answer to these questions. These have to do with the 4 permanent resources. Or the 14 resources. At the moment, we have to transfer materials because the freight entrance is far away. We have permanent members of staff. So long as we have renovations occurring in Centre Block. When we return to Centre Block in 10 years, if all goes well, we hope that at that time, well, a configuration has been done based on the completion of all renovations. We didn't have a service entrance for West Block because it was in renovation. But now we're talking about these new resources. We're talking about resources that are on a permanent basis during the renovation period. They're only permanent for the project, because after which we will have a more sensible freight entrance, and so we won't need to transfer materials as much as we have to do now. "10 years or more is a permanent position in our eyes. There are rules stating that you cannot keep temporary workers over a number of years. If perhaps in 10 years we're in a situation wherein we have to right-size, what we usually do is proceed through attrition. When we will have determined what the access points will be for the new Centre Block, and if we realize that we'll have to right-size, and we do so through attrition, we do so without having an impact on the current level of human resources." Thank you. Ms. Bergen.
Thank you. And I've just got a couple of specific questions. I think there still needs to be a bit more clarity around the whole food services issue. So if I'm understanding you correctly, the off-site facility is our facility as well. And so in a sense, you're going to have to hire more people for that, or have more people there, and then as well delivering. Because I know right now you're attributing about 5 extra staff needed for something that I would think would mean that we actually need less staff in food services because we don't actually have a kitchen in West Block and we're not preparing the food. So, so I still would like a little bit more clarity around that. Mm-hmm. The other 2 questions I have, one is around what you're calling procedural services, where you need a resource for a 1-year period to ensure operational readiness and testing of all systems. Wouldn't that be when the installer installs the system, is not part of the service that they test to ensure it's ready, and then that they guarantee it to some extent? So I just wondered about that. And then as well, I've noticed the operating line, I don't know where those numbers come from. So, you know, on, for example, the first category, maintenance and material handling, for 6 full-time employees, operating is about $17,000. Whereas when you go to the last page, ongoing support for campus-wide operation for 2 full-time employees, operating is almost 200 and, well, it's over 217,000 per year. So I'm not sure what that operating line means, and if you could explain that to me and where those numbers come from. And then on that same category, I would ask, we've almost $500,000 for 2 full-time employees who are going to be refinishing heritage furniture. I'd like a little bit more explanation on that. That's kind of the last category on the page 4.
Okay. Thank you. I'm going to answer the first one related to food services. We came earlier in the spring with a submission for the transformation of food services to be ready for the transition that's required in the operation for the upcoming full utilization of the food production facility and the facilities that we're going to have on the hill, because we're still going to have a what we call the finishing kitchens in the West Block for both the cafeteria and the parliamentary dining rooms. So the food production, the food is produced at the food production facility, transported to the campus, and the mise en plate, la mise en assiette, is being done on site, and we do the final preparation in the West Block, in the actual West Block, or other sites as required. So that was approved earlier in the spring to allow us to do that transition. The additional resources that we're asking here is basically in terms of transportation, just to transport the goods, the additional transportation requirements between the off-site facility and the precinct in terms of food. The second question was related to the testing, the readiness of the systems. Those systems are in-house systems in terms of the actual system that they use for chamber business and committee business, etc. And to make sure that the system are fully operational in the new setting in the West Block, we need one person for, I believe, is 1 year, the transition year, to do all the testing required to make sure that there's no fault in those systems as we move to the West Block. So that's the requirement for the temporary resources there, the temporary resource.
Yeah, and I guess I just don't, I would think it's because I'm assuming it's all brand new, that testing.
Yeah, and we want to make sure that we want to make sure that it works well, so there's no surprises when we operate under the new context, and also yeah. Sorry.
Then just that last category on the $500,000 for 2 people who are going to be basically refinishing of heritage furniture, will put okay, that's going to put a pressure on trade services, and so in order to meet members' needs, 2 permanent resources within trade services will be required. That, and then also just that operating line, where that number comes from, or what that is in each category, and that's all my questions.
Yes, there's the salary for the 2 FTEs, and there's also an operating ask of $200,000 for the operation, which includes some equipment and consumables that are being used to support the activities. So the actual FTE requirement is in the column of salaries. So it's not 500,000. It's
Yes. No. I recognize the salaries.
Okay.
I didn't know each one of these categories. The operating is just. It doesn't look like it's a formula. Or if it is, I don't know what that is. It's just a number, and I wasn't sure what that operating.
It's an operational requirement to conduct the business for the additional workload that we expect. We forecasted to support the campus.
Thanks. I have Mr. Leblanc and then Mr. Strahl.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Merci pour la présentation et merci pour le travail.
Thank you for your presentation and the work that you have undertaken so well for a long time. This is a very complex project, and I'm aware of your difficult work, and I would like to thank you. A question we have talked about in the past. I would like you to remind us or think about the following. Moving from centre block to west block. That may happen within months or a year of the general election. When you created your long-term plan, you didn't know that we would have so many minority governments, but it seems that in 2019 there will be a general election. And so moving everyone in 2018, a number of MPs hope that they will be re-elected. Unfortunately, that is not always the case. There is a natural change that happens through elections. And I was wondering how you can explain this scenario. I don't propose that we wait until 2019, but we should at least think about the issue of timing. Susan will be answering to that question, given the fact that it's about the LTVP as a whole.
PC Public Services Procurement Canada on delivering the West Block project. We were here at the board at the last meeting, and essentially we're looking at 3 scenarios for the move. The project is currently going well. There's still a lot of work to finish off over the next 7 months. So PSPC is predicting that they're going to finish on time and on schedule and budget so that we can move summer, fall of next year. However, we do have 3 occupancy scenarios based on, our risk assessments. One is, the actual move on time. The second would be if there's a delay to move over a Christmas period. And the third scenario is the following summer that coincides with the election. We recognize that would save a move. And if the project is delayed for any reason, that's the scenario we would go to.
Merci.
Thank you very much. Mr. Strahl.
Just a brief question that deals probably more with the 8 temporary positions. As Ms. Bergen noted, perhaps I'm misunderstanding it, but 1 year to test, it's a big room and it's an important room. If it takes 6 months or 3 months instead, same with locksmith services, etc., what is the mechanism? Is that employee, has signed a 1-year contract and therefore has a good year, or is there a provision that when the work is done, the employment ends?
Yes, when we hire term employees, it has a start and an end date, but the end date can be ended prematurely if the operational requirements change. So we have the flexibility to do that. If, for example, right now it's been forecasted that there's a requirement for 1 year for that specific task. However, if it takes shorter than that, we have the mechanism to end without any consequences.
Thank you.
Okay, so that's all I have for members wishing to speak or ask questions about this. Is there agreement to approve this request? I see agreement. Okay, agreed. Thank you very much. We're not quite at 1 o'clock yet. We're coming toward it, and we'd like to go on to the last item, which is a submission regarding sustaining the information technology systems and facility assets acquired through the long-term vision and plan. We have Monsieur Stéphane Aubé ready to lead this discussion, along with some colleagues, Jean-Marc Lundy and Susan Kolba. I just want to ask colleagues, the room, I'm told, is available beyond 1 o'clock. I don't know if the members of the board are, and I'm seeing some shaking. I'm not surprised because, of course, House leaders and whips kind of get busy around 1 o'clock most days, but apparently you're not going to be available after 1 o'clock. So we'll go to 1 o'clock. And if we aren't able to finish this by then, we'll come back to it at our next meeting. Monsieur Aubé. Monsieur Aubé.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Before I begin, we have Jean-Marc Lundy, who works on financials. If you have any detailed questions on finance, then you can ask him. Susan, who is head of long-term renovations. We also have a CFO with us to validate what we're presenting today, to make sure that the numbers are right and necessary for the administration of the House.
The approval of the Board of Internal Economy for funding to operate, to maintain, and to life cycle the building components and the building connectivity assets that have been acquired through the long-term vision and plan since 2001. If approved by the board, this will allow the board and the HOC to fulfill our role and requirements in order to sustain the LTVP as agreed with Public Service and Procurement Canada in 2003. It would also allow the House administration to re-baseline our budget in the context of these investments that were made, and also in the context of the approval that was given by the board to the House administration in 2014-15. In 2014-15, the board had approved $12 million to the House administration to sustain these assets. We're now here today to seek additional funding as new assets are coming on board and new costs are coming to bear in order to support the long-term vision plan and the facilities that have been transferred over to the House responsibility. So, avant d'aller dans les détails, Monsieur.
Before I go into details, Mr. Speaker, I would like to give you a bit more context to members of this board. Telling you why we're here today, it's important to understand the scope of renovations that have been undertaken on the parliamentary campus. A few quick points before we move on to recommendations and Q&A.
2001, well, in 2001, the renovations were approved by this board. And the reality was that when we approved the renovation, it was all about renovating this building, the center block. And to get to this building, we needed to vacate this building. And to vacate this building, we needed to renovate the west block. You saw last week, we made a presentation about the status of the west block. But to vacate west block, we needed to actually do renovations to other facilities and also to acquire additional space. And this process started actually in 2001, or prior to 2001. Le premier projet de rénovation qui a commencé.
The first renovation progress that kicked everything off was renovating the Justice Building. For those who have been here for longer than others, for the Justice Building, we bought this building in order to renovate it and create space for MPs. We also decided that we had to vacate 180 Wellington and Promenade, which is now called Valor, in order to make West Block available. We also wanted to bring House administration, to bring them to Queen and Bank Streets, as well as Spark Street. What you see in yellow, these are spaces that were affected between 2001 and 2007. Between 2007 and 2016, you see that we have continued our renovation exercise. that mainly focused on 180 Wellington. With the 10 committee rooms we now use, we also focused on Sir John A. Macdonald, which replaced West Block Room 200. And so, 200 West Block is now the equivalence of Sir John A. Macdonald. We had temporary committee rooms at 1 Wellington, which was essential because of our evacuation of West Block. We also invested into certain areas for house administration on Queen Street, for 131 Queen and 155 Queen. And now we have 2017 to 2020. As we presented last week, we presented the opening of West Block for autumn of 2018. We also have the Visitor Welcome Centre, which will be the entrance point for MPs and the general public who want to have access to the parliamentary campus. Generally speaking, the campus represents 27 buildings, 11 of which are occupied by the House of Commons alone. The investment funds for all of this represents about $200 million transferred from PSPC to the House of Commons for long-term planning. The requests we're making now is to maintain and operate the same life cycle for the transferred buildings that were not part of the original budget put forth by the House of Commons. Just a quick moment to talk about governance and key roles and responsibilities. During renovations, PSPC is a custodian for buildings. They are responsible for the building as a whole and for funding of renovations and the renovations themselves.
The renovation is to play the role of the technical authority. So we're there to advise PSPC on our requirements and also to ensure that the requirements are met through the renovations. But we are also responsible for the operational financing to support the assets that are transferred through the renovations to the House, hence why we're here today. So this chart that you're seeing here today basically is a recap of the investments that have been done since 2001. So from 2001 to 2016, over $128 million of assets and other components being specialized air conditioners, specialized battery system, compressors, humidity control systems that are specific to the House of Commons, specific broadcasting lighting systems, and also specific technologies to support these rooms, such as the audio systems, the broadcasting systems. These are the components and the connectivity systems that were transferred since 2016. We are planning to transfer an additional $75 million of assets from 2017 to 2019. In 2014-15, as approved by the board, $9 million of the $12 million that I referred to earlier were basically distributed across these four major investment portfolios. So investments were made in the context of the networking for the House, the broadcasting and the audiovisual, the telephony aspects, and other elements relating to physical security that we support. If you look at the distribution of the costs, over 40% of the costs that we incur are paid directly for maintenance fees that we incur during the day-to-day basis. 30% of the costs are assigned towards life cycling of these components and connectivity assets. And the past cost was around 12% for salaries. We're planning an average cost of around 21% of the funding required for salary requirements. So this is basically a distribution of how the money is spent currently and how the money will be spent over the next 3 years. So you've seen the components assets, you've seen the technology assets. So these are the recommendations that we're seeking. So in addition to the $12 million that we asked in 2014-15, we're now here today to seek additional funding for connectivity assets of $2 million for next year, For 1920, an additional $3 million, and then for 2021, an additional $5 million. And for the components assets, of the $3 million that was approved in 2015, we're seeking an additional $6 million a year for the next 3 years, basically to focus on the assets that were basically transferred to us more than 17 years ago now. So I will open up, sir, for questions, either in French and English.
Okay, we only have a few minutes. I had Mr. Strahl. We'll probably, we'll see how we get 1 o'clock by the time.
Mr. Speaker, I would just say, given the $30 million ask and the 3 minutes left, that perhaps we bring this group back for questions.
That makes absolute sense to me, and I just wanted to highlight that when I said that I know the House leaders and the whips have important work to do at this point, I certainly did not mean to suggest that a Minister of Fisheries would not also, I mean, naturally, I would feel strongly about that, would also have important work that he has to do.
You, Mr. Speaker, would be particularly familiar with those important responsibilities.
I recall them well. I thank colleagues very much. This meeting is adjourned.